Commander Sarah Chen was enjoying her first quiet evening in 3 months when the emergency beacon shattered the silence. Red lights bathed her quarters aboard the orbital station Prometheus, and the familiar voice of her AI assistant, Marcus, filled the room. "Commander, we have an unidentified vessel approaching at extreme velocity. It's not responding to standard communications." Sarah rolled out of bed, her bare feet hitting the cold metal floor. Years of military training had conditioned her to wake instantly, fully alert. Size and configuration? Unknown design, roughly the size of a heavy cruiser. Energy signatures are off the charts. But it's not weapons hot. It's transmitting something. On screen, the holographic display materialized in front of her, showing a vessel that defied every principle of human ship design. Instead of clean lines and geometric shapes, this craft resembled something organic, almost alive. Its surface rippled like scales, and what looked like massive wings folded against its sides, pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, then caught herself. Beauty could be deadly in space. "Commander, the transmission is coming through now. It's unusual." A voice echoed through her quarters, speaking perfect English but with an otherworldly resonance that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "Human vessel. I am Prince Draconis of the Imperial House of Flames. I seek Commander Sarah Chen. I have been told she is the greatest warrior among your species." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Her reputation had apparently spread further than she'd realized. "Marcus, how does an alien know my name?" Cross-referencing. "Commander, 3 months ago during the Centauri conflict, your tactical brilliance was broadcast across multiple systems. It appears several non-human civilizations were monitoring those transmissions." The voice continued, and now Sarah could hear something new in it. Desperation barely held in check. "Commander Chen, I come not as conqueror but as supplicant. My mother, Empress Aurelia the Golden Flame, has been attacked. She lies dying, and those responsible are beyond my power to defeat. I have heard of human military prowess. I offer alliance, resources, anything you require. Please, I need your help." Sarah had faced down enemy fleets, survived boarding actions that would give normal people nightmares, and never backed down from a fight. But something in this alien prince's voice, the raw pain, the desperate love of a child for their parent, cut straight through her professional detachment. "Marcus, full defensive protocols but do not lock weapons. Prepare docking base 7 for unusual configurations. Commander, protocol requires." "I'm aware of protocol. Patch me through to the prince." A moment later, she was speaking directly to the alien vessel. "Prince Draconis, this is Commander Sarah Chen. I'm willing to hear you out, but understand that if this is some kind of trick, you'll discover why my reputation for warfare is well-deserved." "I understand, Commander. I submit myself to your judgment." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in docking bay 7, watching something impossible unfold before her eyes. The alien vessel didn't dock so much as meld with the station's hull, creating an airtight seal through methods that her engineers were frantically trying to understand. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Prince Draconis stepped through. He was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Nearly 8 feet tall, his form was humanoid but clearly not human. Scales covered his body in shades of deep blue and silver, and his eyes were molten gold. What appeared to be small horns curved back from his forehead, and when he moved, Sarah caught glimpses of what might have been retractable claws. But it was his bearing that impressed her most. Despite his obvious distress, he carried himself with the dignity of true royalty, and when he bowed to her, it was with perfect, respectful precision. "Commander Chen, I am in your debt simply for agreeing to see me." Sarah nodded curtly. "Tell me what happened." Draconis's golden eyes flickered with pain. 3 standard cycles ago, a fleet appeared in our home system without warning. Ships unlike anything in our databases, wielding weapons that seemed to ignore our shields entirely. They demanded surrender and tribute. I assume your mother refused. A bitter smile crossed the prince's features. The Empress has ruled for over 2 millennia. She has never bowed to anyone. She led our fleet herself, as is our way. What happened in the battle? We were losing. The admission clearly cost him. Their technology was superior in ways we couldn't comprehend. But Mother, she has powers that are not easily understood. She began to turn the tide through sheer force of will and ancient abilities that few possess. Sarah waited, sensing there was more. That's when they used a weapon we had never seen. Not directed at our ships, but at her directly. Some kind of energy beam that seemed designed specifically to counter her abilities. It struck her down, and the rest of our fleet was forced to retreat. Where are these attackers now? They have established a blockade around our homeworld. They're not attacking the planet, but they're demanding complete surrender and the installation of their own government. Without Mother's leadership, our people are paralyzed. The nobility argues among themselves, while our world remains under siege. Sarah began pacing, her tactical mind already working on the problem. What makes you think humans can help where your own forces couldn't? Draconis straightened with obvious pride. Because, Commander, we learned something about you during the Centauri conflict that changed how we view your species. Your people don't just fight wars. You solve them. Explain. In most civilizations, warfare is about overpowering the enemy through superior numbers, technology, or individual might. But humans, you adapt. You improvise. You find weaknesses that shouldn't exist and exploit them in ways that shouldn't be possible. Sarah felt a surge of species pride. Though she kept her expression neutral, that's a lot of faith to put in one human. Not just one human. Draconis's eyes gleamed with something that might have been hope. I'm not asking you to fight alone. I'm asking you to teach us how humans fight. How you think, how you win against impossible odds. And in exchange, anything we can offer. Technology, resources, knowledge, alliance. The Dragon Empire spans 12 systems and has existed for over 10,000 years. Our gratitude would be substantial. Sarah stopped pacing and studied the alien prince. She could see the desperation he was trying to hide, the barely contained anguish over his mother's condition. But she could also see steel beneath the emotion. The kind of determination that reminded her of her best soldiers. I'll need to see the tactical situation myself. Full sensor data, fleet dispositions, everything you have on these attackers. I have it all here. Draconis produced a device that looked like crystallized starlight. This contains every piece of information we've gathered. Sarah accepted the device, feeling its strange warmth pulse against her palm. Marcus, prepare my personal ship for immediate departure. Full combat load. Commander, her AI's voice carried a note of concern. You're not seriously considering. I'm considering helping someone who loves their mother enough to humble themselves before strangers. Besides, a dangerous smile crossed her features. It's been too quiet lately. Draconis's relief was palpable. Commander, how can I ever save it for after we've won? Sarah's voice had taken on the crisp tone of command. I'll need detailed specifications on your ships, weapons, and capabilities. I'll also need to understand these powers your mother possesses. The dragon's breath, Draconis said reverently. It's an ability that runs in the royal bloodline. The capacity to channel pure energy, to bend space itself to our will. Mother is the most powerful practitioner in our history. And this weapon that hurt her was specifically designed to counter it? It would seem so. Which suggests our attackers have studied us extensively before making their move. Sarah nodded grimly. Then we'll have to ensure they haven't studied humans as thoroughly. How long until we reach your system? 3 days at maximum acceleration. Good. That gives me time to formulate a strategy. She turned toward the docking bay exit, then paused. Prince Draconis, I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this for your empire or your technology. I'm doing it because no child should watch their parent die while feeling helpless to stop it. The prince's golden eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. I understand, Commander. I hope you do. Because the things I'm going to ask your people to do, The risks I'm going to ask them to take, they're going to think I'm insane. And are you? Sarah's smile was predatory. Prince, you're about to learn what it means when humans get angry. Your enemies are going to discover that attacking someone's mother is a very bad idea. As they left the docking bay, Sarah's mind was already racing through possibilities. She'd need to understand dragon physiology, their ship designs, their tactical preferences. More importantly, she'd need to understand their enemies well enough to find the weaknesses that must exist. Because she'd learned one thing in her years of warfare: there were always weaknesses. You just had to be human enough to find them. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah's ship, the Retribution, was a masterpiece of human military engineering. Small, fast, and packed with enough firepower to level a small moon. More importantly, it contained the most advanced tactical computer systems humanity had developed, along with manufacturing capabilities that could produce almost anything given enough raw materials. As they prepared for departure, Draconis provided her with the promised intelligence data. The attackers called themselves the Hegemony, and they appeared to be a coalition of species united under some kind of strict authoritarian government. Their ships were massive, heavily armed, and shielded by energy barriers that had proven impervious to dragon fire. Impressive, Sarah murmured, studying the tactical displays. But they're making the same mistake everyone makes when fighting humans. Which is, they're assuming that superior technology equals automatic victory. Sarah's fingers danced across her command console, pulling up historical human conflicts. Let me tell you about something called asymmetric warfare, Prince. And then let me explain why humans never, ever fight fair. As the Retribution undocked from Prometheus and jumped to hyperspace, Sarah felt the familiar rush of anticipation that came before a challenging fight. She had 3 days to turn the tactics of an ancient dragon empire upside down, devise a strategy to defeat an enemy with superior technology, and somehow save the life of an alien empress. Just another day in the life of a human commander. But as she looked at Prince Draconis standing proudly beside her command chair, she realized this wasn't just about military victory. This was about family, about the bonds that transcended species, about the fierce protective love that drove sapient beings to extraordinary acts. The Hegemony had made a critical error. They had hurt a mother in front of her child, and now that child had brought that pain to the attention of humanity. They were about to learn why that was a mistake of cosmic proportions. The journey to the Dragon Empire's homeworld gave Sarah 3 days to completely revolutionize centuries of military doctrine. She spent the first day studying dragon physiology, technology, and combat methods. The second day was devoted to analyzing hegemony tactics and technology. The third day, she began her real work, teaching Prince Draconis how humans thought about warfare. Your people fight like knights, Sarah observed, studying recordings of previous dragon military campaigns. Honor, glory, individual prowess. Very impressive, but predictable. Draconis frowned at what sounded like criticism. The dragon way of war has served us well for millennia, against other honorable opponents, yes, but the hegemony isn't honorable. Sarah highlighted sections of their attack patterns. Look at this. They waited until your mother personally led the fleet, then specifically targeted her with a weapon designed to exploit her unique abilities. That's not battlefield tactics. That's assassination. A coward's way. An effective way. Sarah's tone was matter of fact. And if we're going to beat them, we need to be more effective. That means abandoning your ideas about fair fights and honor in battle. She pulled up a holographic display showing various human military conflicts. Let me show you how humans won a war against an enemy with superior technology, numbers, and resources. For the next several hours, she walked him through the American Revolutionary War, the Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union, and a dozen other conflicts where humans had achieved victory against overwhelming odds through unconventional tactics. You see the pattern? We don't try to match our enemy's strengths. We force them to fight on our terms, using methods they haven't prepared for. Draconis was silent for long minutes, processing what he'd learned. You're suggesting we abandon everything that defines us as warriors. I'm suggesting you decide what matters more, your traditions or your mother's life. The prince's golden eyes flashed with anger, then pain, then finally resignation. What do you need me to do? First, I need you to trust me completely, even when what I ask seems impossible or dishonorable. Second, I need you to convince your military leaders to do the same. Third, Sarah's expression grew serious. I need to meet your mother. Commander, she's unconscious. The weapon that struck her, I don't care if she's in a coma. I need to understand exactly what these powers are that make her so dangerous to the hegemony. Because I guarantee you, whatever that weapon does, there's a way around it. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Dragon system, Sarah immediately understood why the hegemony blockade was so effective. 30 massive ships, each easily 5 times the size of the largest Dragon vessel, formed a perfect sphere around the homeworld. Their energy signatures were enormous, and preliminary scans confirmed that their shields were indeed impervious to conventional Dragon weapons. Impressive, Sarah murmured, but they're making a fundamental error in positioning. How so? Draconis leaned over her shoulder to study the tactical display. They're thinking like conquerors, not defenders. Look at the gaps in their formation. They're positioned to prevent anything from escaping the planet, not to defend against an attack from outside the system. There are no gaps. Their overlapping fields of fire cover every approach vector. Sarah smiled. Prince, you're thinking in 3 dimensions. Space combat isn't fought on a flat plane. Before he could ask what she meant, Sarah was already plotting a course that would take them through the system's asteroid belt, using gravitational slings and sensor shadows to approach the planet undetected. This is impossible, Draconis muttered, as they skipped the retribution across the gravity wells of 3 different moons, using their mass to accelerate while remaining hidden from hegemony sensors. This is why humans are good at warfare, Sarah replied calmly. We think everything is possible until proven otherwise. They reached the Dragon homeworld, a magnificent planet of golden cities and crystalline spires, without triggering a single alarm. The surface was scarred from orbital bombardment. But the major cities remained intact. They're not trying to destroy your world, Sarah observed. They want it functional for occupation. That's another advantage we can exploit. The reunion between Draconis and his people was emotional but brief. Within an hour, Sarah found herself in the most surreal military briefing of her career, surrounded by Dragon generals whose scales gleamed like precious metals, and whose eyes burned with barely contained fury. General Pirian, the eldest of the military council, was openly skeptical. Prince, with respect, this human female is barely larger than a hatchling. How can she succeed where our greatest warriors have failed? Sarah stepped forward before Draconis could respond. General, how many battles have you won? Pirian drew himself up to his full 10-foot height. I have commanded victorious campaigns across 7 systems, little human. I have burned enemy fleets to ash with the power of my breath alone. Impressive. I've won 12 major engagements, including 3 where my forces were outnumbered 10-1 or more. But that's not the important difference between us. And what is? You've won battles through superior strength. I've won them by making my enemies destroy themselves. Sarah activated her tactical display, showing the current hegemony positions. You want to beat them in direct combat because that's honorable. I want to make them beat each other because that's effective. She spent the next hour outlining her plan, watching the Dragon generals' expressions shift from skepticism to disbelief to cautious interest. The strategy was so alien to their way of thinking that several had to ask her to repeat sections. You want us to run away? General Pirian's voice dripped with disdain. I want you to appear to run away, while actually maneuvering the enemy into a position where their own weapons will do our work for us. Sarah highlighted specific ship positions. Look at their formation. Those ships are powerful, but they're also massive and slow to maneuver. If we can force them to fire on each other— Impossible, another general interrupted. No commander would be so careless. Arrogant commanders make mistakes when facing tactics they've never encountered. Sarah's voice carried absolute confidence. and the hegemony is about to face something they definitely haven't encountered, which is a human who's really, really angry about someone hurting a mother. The meeting broke up with the dragon generals grudgingly agreeing to trust her plan, though their body language suggested they expected failure. Only Prince Draconis seemed to have complete faith in her abilities. "They think you're insane," he observed as they walked toward the medical facility where his mother lay. "Good. If my own allies think the plan is crazy, imagine how the enemy will react." Empress Aurelia was a sight that took Sarah's breath away. Even unconscious and injured, she radiated power and majesty. Her scales were pure gold. And even in sleep, energy seemed to dance beneath her skin, but Sarah could see the damage. Ugly burns across her torso, where the hegemony weapon had struck, and an unnatural stillness that suggested the injury was more than physical. The weapon disrupted her connection to the dragon's breath, Draconis explained quietly. "Without it, she's mortal, vulnerable." Sarah approached the bedside, studying the Empress with a tactician's eye. "Tell me exactly how her powers work." "She can channel pure energy, reshape matter at the atomic level, even manipulate gravitational fields to a limited degree. In battle, she becomes something close to a force of nature. And this weapon specifically counters those abilities? It seems to create a field that interferes with her connection to the energy source that powers the dragon's breath." Sarah nodded slowly, then surprised Draconis by placing her hand gently on his mother's forehead. "Empress, I'm Commander Sarah Chen of Earth. Your son asked me to help, and I intend to keep that promise. But I need you to trust me when you wake up, because what I'm about to do is going to seem impossible." To her amazement, the Empress's eyes flickered open, focusing with effort on Sarah's face. When she spoke, her voice was weak but clear. "You are the human warrior my son spoke of." "Yes, ma'am. I can sense something in you. A fire that burns differently than ours. Colder. More precise." Sarah felt an odd sensation, as if the Empress was looking directly into her soul. "Can you fight, Your Majesty?" "Not as I once could. The weapon, it burns still. Then we'll have to win this without your powers. But I'll need your help in another way." "Speak." Sarah leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I need you to trust me enough to appear to surrender. Can you do that?" The Empress's golden eyes flashed with surprise and anger, but then she seemed to see something in Sarah's expression that gave her pause. "You have a plan. I have a plan that will require everyone to think you've given up, including your own people." A long moment of silence passed between them. Then the Empress smiled, an expression both terrible and beautiful. "Human, if you can save my world and my people, I will gladly appear weak for as long as necessary." "Good, because in about 12 hours, the hegemony is going to receive an offer of surrender that's going to be far too tempting to refuse." As they left the medical facility, Draconis couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. "Commander, what exactly are you planning?" Sarah's smile was predatory. "Prince, your people fight like dragons, powerful, majestic, and direct. The hegemony fights like bullies, overwhelming force applied without subtlety. But humans fight like humans, which means we cheat. We lie. We use our enemies' expectations against them. And we never, ever, fight the battle our opponent expects." She pulled up a communication interface and began composing a message. "In a few hours, the hegemony is going to receive a transmission from Empress Aurelia, offering complete surrender in exchange for sparing her people." Unquote. Draconis's eyes widened in shock. "But Mother would never—" "Of course she wouldn't, but they don't know that. They'll see exactly what they expect to see. A defeated ruler choosing her people's survival over her pride. And then they'll make the mistake of believing they've won. They'll drop their guard, reorganize their forces, and prepare for occupation duties instead of combat." Sarah's fingers flew over the controls, setting up false communication protocols and fabricating sensor signatures. "That's when we hit them with something they've definitely never seen before." Witches. Sarah's grin was savage. 30 dragon ships, equipped with human stealth technology and human weapons, attacking from vectors that shouldn't exist, while their own formation tears itself apart through carefully orchestrated confusion. She paused in her work to look directly at the prince. Your Highness, in about 18 hours, the hegemony is going to learn why attacking someone's family in front of a human is the last mistake you ever make. As night fell over the dragon homeworld, Sarah worked feverishly to implement modifications to the dragon fleet. Human stealth technology, adapted for dragon ships, human weapons, integrated with dragon power systems. Human tactics, taught to dragon warriors who had never conceived of such methods. It was insane, impossible, and completely against every rule of honorable warfare. It was going to work perfectly, because while the hegemony had studied dragons, they had never encountered humans. And they were about to discover that when a human's protective instincts were triggered, the concept of a fair fight simply ceased to exist. The surrender broadcast went out exactly as planned. Empress Aurelia, looking appropriately defeated and weakened, spoke directly to the hegemony fleet, with words that must have been bitter as poison in her mouth. I am Empress Aurelia of the Dragon Empire. My people have suffered enough under your blockade. I offer complete surrender in exchange for the safety of my citizens and my world. Sarah watched the hegemony response from the hidden command ship, a retrofitted dragon vessel now equipped with the most advanced human stealth technology she could improvise. The enemy fleet's formation immediately began to shift, ships moving into occupation positions rather than combat readiness. Perfect, she murmured. They're taking the bait. Beside her, Prince Draconis looked physically ill. Watching my mother appear so defeated, even knowing it's false, it feels wrong. That feeling is exactly why this will work, Sarah replied, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Your emotional reaction is genuine. The hegemony will see what they expect to see. A broken empire submitting to superior force. Admiral Thane of the hegemony fleet responded within the hour, his transmission dripping with arrogant satisfaction. Empress, your wisdom serves you well. Prepare to receive our occupation forces. Your personal surrender will be accepted aboard my flagship in 6 hours. 6 hours, Sarah repeated thoughtfully. Perfect. That gives us time for Phase 2. She activated the fleet-wide communication system, addressing the dragon commanders who were hidden throughout the system in ships that shouldn't have been invisible to any known scanning technology. Dragon Fleet. This is Commander Chen. All units, begin Phase 2. Remember, you are not dragons today. Today, you are ghosts. Over the next 4 hours, 30 dragon ships began a complex dance of positioning that would have been impossible without human navigation computers and stealth systems. They moved through asteroid fields, behind planetary bodies, and along gravitational anomalies that masked their energy signatures completely. The hegemony, confident in their victory, had already begun landing troops on the dragon homeworld. Their fleet formation was loose, optimized for supporting ground operations rather than defending against attack. Commander. General Pirion's voice came through the secure channel, grudging respect finally evident in his tone. Your modifications to our ships are remarkable. We are completely invisible to their sensors. Remember, General, patience is key. We strike only when I give the signal, and only at the targets I designate. This isn't about destroying them. It's about making them destroy themselves. Sarah had spent hours studying hegemony ship designs and tactical doctrines. Their vessels were powerful, but built around a centralized command structure. Disrupt their communication and coordination, and they would become dangerous to each other. Phase 3 commencing. Sarah announced, as her sensors detected the hegemony flagship, preparing to receive the Empress's surrender. The first part of her plan unfolded with clockwork precision. Dragon ships, invisible to enemy sensors, began attacking hegemony communication relays with surgical strikes, not destroying them outright, but introducing subtle malfunctions and delays. Dragon 7 to command, the enemy is beginning to experience communication difficulties. reported Captain Ignitus from his concealed position near the largest hegemony vessel. Excellent. Phase 4 is go. The next stage was pure psychological warfare. Sarah had studied hegemony command protocols and discovered they relied heavily on automated defensive systems that would respond to any unidentified contact with overwhelming force. She began spoofing sensor contacts, creating false signatures that appeared to be small attack craft moving between hegemony ships. The automated systems, unable to communicate effectively with command due to the communication disruptions, began engaging these phantom targets. The result was exactly what Sarah had hoped for. Hegemony ships began firing on empty space, their weapons lighting up the darkness around their own fleet. When those weapons missed their non-existent targets, they struck other hegemony vessels. What is happening? Admiral Thane's voice crackled over intercepted communications. Why are our ships firing on each other? Sir, we're detecting multiple small contacts, but they keep disappearing from sensors. Impossible. Maintain formation and cease fire immediately. But the damage was already done. Several hegemony ships had taken friendly fire, their shields weakened and their crews confused. More importantly, their tight blockade formation was breaking apart as ships maneuvered to avoid their own fleet's weapons. Now, Sarah whispered, the Dragon fleet struck from impossible angles, emerging from stealth at point-blank range to deliver devastating attacks on specifically chosen targets. But they weren't trying to destroy the hegemony ships. They were targeting weapon systems, shield generators, and communication arrays. Dragon 3 to command. Target neutralized. Their main cannon is offline. Dragon 15 to command. Enemy shields down to 30%. Dragon 22 to command. They've lost all long-range communications. Admiral Thane's flagship was in chaos. Half his fleet was damaged from friendly fire. The other half was under attack from ships that had appeared from nowhere, and his communication network was falling apart faster than his tactical officers could compensate. All ships, fall back to defensive positions. Form up on the flagship. It was exactly the wrong order to give, and exactly what Sarah had been waiting for. Dragon Fleet, execute Maneuver Omega. The Dragon ships, instead of pressing their attack, suddenly accelerated away from the hegemony fleet at maximum speed, appearing to retreat in panic. The hegemony forces, seeing their enemies flee, began pursuit, despite their damaged condition. That's when Sarah sprung the real trap. Empress, she said over a private channel, it's time. On the planet's surface, Empress Aurelia opened her golden eyes fully for the first time since being injured. The weapon that had struck her down was designed to disrupt her connection to the dragon's breath, but Sarah had spent hours studying the energy patterns and discovered something the hegemony had missed. The weapon didn't permanently sever the connection. It created interference. And like any interference, it could be overcome with sufficient power and the right frequency. I understand, Commander Chen, the Empress said, rising from her medical bed with effort. You need a distraction. I need you to be yourself, Your Majesty, just for a few minutes. The Empress smiled, and for the first time in days, golden fire began to dance around her claws. It would be my pleasure. What happened next became legend throughout the galaxy. Empress Aurelia, rising into the sky above her homeworld like a golden star, channeled every remaining ounce of her power into a display that lit up half the system. She wasn't attacking anything. She was simply announcing that the Dragon Empire was far from defeated. The psychological effect on the hegemony fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Admiral Thane, who had been told the Empress was neutralized, suddenly found himself facing an enemy who was supposed to be helpless. Impossible, he screamed over the communications. The weapon worked. She should be powerless. Sir, energy readings are off the charts. She's stronger than ever. In his panic, Admiral Thane made the final mistake that doomed his fleet. He ordered all ships to focus fire on the Empress, abandoning their pursuit of the Dragon fleet to eliminate what he saw as the primary threat. 30 hegemony ships turned their weapons on a single target, pouring enough firepower to shatter a moon toward the golden figure blazing in space above the Dragon homeworld. That's when they discovered that the retreating Dragon fleet had led them into a carefully prepared kill zone. The dragon ships had positioned themselves so that when the hegemony fleet turned to fire on the Empress, their formation would place them in a perfect crossfire pattern with each other. As 30 ships opened fire simultaneously, their combined weapons fire created a web of energy beams that crisscrossed through their own formation. Admiral Thane had perhaps 2 seconds to realize what was happening before his own fleet's weapons tore itself apart. Ship after ship vanished in brilliant explosions, as they were caught in the crossfire of their own weapons, fired by their own allies, in pursuit of a target that was no longer there. Because Empress Aurelia, having accomplished her part of the plan, had teleported to safety using the last of her recovered strength, in less than 10 minutes, the mighty hegemony fleet was reduced to scattered debris and a handful of damaged vessels fleeing the system in full retreat. Sarah sat back in her command chair, watching the tactical display show the complete destruction of enemy forces without the loss of a single dragon ship. "Commander," Prince Draconis said quietly, "how did you know it would work?" Sarah smiled tiredly. "Because the hegemony made the same mistake everyone makes when fighting humans. They assumed that superior technology meant they were superior tactically. They studied your mother's powers, your fleet capabilities, your military doctrine, but they never studied the one thing that mattered, which was, they never studied how far someone will go to protect their family." Admiral Thane's final transmission, sent from his crippled flagship as it limped toward the edge of the system, was intercepted by the Dragon fleet. "This isn't over. The hegemony will return with greater force." Sarah activated the response channel personally. "Admiral, this is Commander Sarah Chen of Earth. I want you to deliver a message to your superiors." "What message, human?" "Tell them that the Dragon Empire is now under the protection of humanity, and tell them that if they want to try this again, they'll be facing both of our species together." There was a long pause before Thane responded. "And what makes you think that threat will deter us?" Sarah's smile was cold as space itself. "Admiral, what you just experienced wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Your fleet was destroyed without us firing a single shot in anger. Imagine what we can do when we're actually trying to hurt you." The transmission cut off, and Sarah knew they wouldn't be seeing the hegemony again anytime soon. 3 days later, Empress Aurelia had recovered enough to hold a formal ceremony in the great throne room of the Dragon capital. Sarah stood before the assembled nobility of an empire that spanned 12 systems, feeling slightly ridiculous in her human military dress uniform, surrounded by beings who looked like living legends. "Commander Sarah Chen of Earth," the Empress spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the vast hall. "You have given us a gift beyond price. Not merely victory, but knowledge. You have shown us that there are ways of thinking, ways of fighting, that we never imagined. Your Majesty, I just helped your people use their own strengths more effectively. You taught us that strength comes in many forms." The Empress rose from her crystal throne, her golden scales catching the light like captured starfire. "You have proven that humanity possesses something we dragons have never fully understood: the ability to find hope in hopeless situations and victory in impossible circumstances." She gestured to Prince Draconis, who stepped forward carrying something that made Sarah's breath catch. It was a small crystal pendant, but the energy contained within it pulsed with the same golden fire that burned in the Empress's eyes. "This is a fragment of the dragon's heart," Aurelia explained, "the source of our power. It has never been given to an outsider, but you are no longer an outsider. You are family." As the pendant was placed around her neck, Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, and for just a moment, she could sense the vast network of energy that connected every dragon in the Empire. She was part of something ancient and powerful now, bound by ties that transcended species. "There is more," the Empress continued. "The Dragon Empire formally requests an alliance with humanity. We offer our technology, our knowledge, our friendship." "And in exchange?" Sarah asked. Prince Draconis stepped forward, his golden eyes bright with emotion. "In exchange, we hope to learn what you've already taught us: that the strength to protect those we love can overcome any obstacle." Sarah looked around the throne room, at the assembled dragon nobility who had initially dismissed her as too small and weak to matter. Now they watched her with respect, and something approaching awe. "Your Majesty," she said formally, "on behalf of humanity, I accept your alliance. But I want you to understand something important. Yes? This wasn't about human superiority or dragon inferiority. This was about what happens when someone threatens a family. Your son came to me not because humans are better warriors, but because I understood his pain." She touched the crystal pendant, feeling its warmth pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Any mother, any father, any child of any species would do the same thing. Love makes us all stronger than we think we are. Empress Aurelia smiled, and in that expression, Sarah could see where Prince Draconis had learned his fierce determination. "Commander, you have given us victory, but more than that, you have given us a new way to understand ourselves and our place in the galaxy." "What do you mean?" "For 10,000 years, the Dragon Empire has stood alone, trusting only in our own power. Today, you have shown us that true strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together." As the ceremony concluded and the great hall erupted in celebration, Sarah found herself surrounded by dragon nobles who wanted to hear more about human military philosophy, human tactics, human ways of thinking. But what struck her most was Prince Draconis, standing beside his mother's throne, no longer the desperate young prince who had begged for her help, but a confident heir who had learned that sometimes the greatest courage came from admitting you needed help. "Commander," he said quietly as the crowd began to disperse, "I owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Prince, you don't owe me anything. You did what any child would do. You fought for your mother. I just helped you fight smarter. And what will you do now?" Sarah looked out through the great windows of the throne room at the dragon homeworld, its golden cities gleaming in the light of twin suns. In orbit above, human and dragon ships patrolled together, the beginning of an alliance that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Now I go home and write a very interesting report for Earth Command. Something tells me humanity is about to become very popular as an ally." She paused, then added with a smile, "Besides, your mother mentioned that the Dragon Empire has several ongoing conflicts that could benefit from human tactical consultation." Prince Draconis laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "Commander, I believe you're going to fit in very well with dragons. We also have trouble walking away from a good fight." As Sarah prepared to depart, she realized that what had started as a rescue mission had become something much more significant. Humanity had found its first true alien allies, and those allies had taught her something valuable in return. Sometimes the greatest victories weren't won through superior firepower or advanced technology. Sometimes they were won by someone who understood that family was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The hegemony had made a critical error. They had attacked not just a ruler or an empire, but a mother. And they had done it in front of her child. They had learned, far too late, why that was never a good idea when humans were involved. In the days to come, word would spread throughout the galaxy about the impossible human victory at the Dragon homeworld. Military academies would study the tactics. Diplomatic corps would analyze the alliance. Historians would document the beginning of a new age of cooperation between species. But for Sarah Chen, walking through the crystal corridors of the Dragon Palace with a pendant of captured starfire around her neck, the important thing was much simpler. A child had asked her to save their mother. She had kept that promise. Everything else was just details. And somewhere in the deep space between the stars, the remnants of the hegemony fleet carried word back to their masters. Humanity had entered galactic politics, and they had chosen their side. The age of human isolation was over. The age of human alliance had begun, and it had all started with a simple request. "Please help me save my mother."